museum was named after George Washington Carver, the Afro-American scientist, one of the great scientists of the 19th century in the field of chemistry, as well as thinker. The building was actually built at 9th and Guadalupe in central Austin, and was the city's original central library at the time, from 1929 until 1934. At that time, a new central library was built, and the building was moved to its present location, Angelina Street, and became the Austin's first black library, as well as Austin's first branch library, the Austin Library System. It served the community as a library, as a focal point for meetings, community activities, from 1934 until 1980, when the new Carver Branch Library was built on Angelina Street. At the time, the community was pulled because there was so much sentiment existing for preserving the building as a historic structure because of its central role in the life of the community over so many years. The community was polled to see what ways the building might be adapted to a new use, and the consensus was that the community would like to have a museum which would be able both to show the history and the development and the culture of the community itself and how it's grown, which is very exciting, very interesting, but also be able to show these things to the community at large. So the exhibits at the museum, which in part treat or explore the history of the community, also show contemporary black and minority art. They have in recent times shown contemporary art done in the continent of Africa. So besides focusing on the immediate East Austin community, the museum very much also tries to portray these things to the Austin community at large. Let me go back a little bit. The museum was the result of a project to restore the building, which was carried out by the Austin Public Library in 1980. It opened at that time as a museum and continued to be operated by the library system until 1983, when it was transferred to the Parks and Recreation Department. But it's operated continuously since 1980.
Dr. George Washington Carver, a world-famous black scientist, can best be remembered for his work done at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. He's known for creating over 300 products from the peanut and over 100 products from the sweet potato. He never patented any of his products because he felt that it would take entirely too much time and he would never get anything else done if that's all he did with his time. Also, the George Washington Carver Museum in Austin, Texas is named after this wonderful scientist.
Probably the high point of the year for the museum in terms of its exhibits and programs comes in January and in February. In January, we're celebrating the anniversary of Martin Luther King's birth, and in February, we're celebrating the annual Black History Month. And so that those 2 months tend to have exhibits that focus on those subjects. programs tend to relate to the exhibits. We present a great variety of things, lectures, readings, performances, concerts. A lot of this is done with the co-sponsorship of the Carver Branch Library, which is located next door to the museum. The one focal point in the life of the community to this day are the regular monthly opening receptions for each new exhibit, which always draw a lot of people. In areas like Texas, where we have a very old, very stable, and very interesting black community, you're dealing with a lot of very interesting aspects. The exhibit that we call the Buffalo Soldier exhibit, which is on the history of black soldiers in the American West, was a typical example, since a lot of it dealt with Central Texas. We're in a geographical position to be able to reflect a very, very important part of the history, the overall history of the American West, which was the role that black Americans played in the settlement and the history of the American West, which is much more important than it was once appreciated. And most of the cities in the American West have significant black communities with long, long histories going back to the pioneer days and the days of the settlement of large areas of the West, particularly in the period right after the Civil War, when large numbers of black Americans were migrating from the South to the western states. So you find cities like Omaha, San Francisco, Denver, just like Austin, with black communities that go back well over a century. It is an area in which we are able to explore and treat a lot of the aspects of traditional Southern as well as traditional American black culture, and explore old Christmas traditions, for example, old holiday traditions, explore some of the, in some cases, some of the unique holiday traditions like Juneteenth, which is the holiday in Texas which commemorates the receiving the news of the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas. The exhibits we have done in many cases have, although focusing on the black community, have been exhibits that in some ways have been much broader. We've done a number of very fine exhibits focusing on the historic architecture of East Austin, which really means a subject that spans the entire history of the community, not just an exhibit on the cultural history of the Afro-American community, but rather an exhibit on the cultural history of the entire city. We like to look at the East Austin community as an area in which there is a cultural continuum that starts with the Native American 200 years ago and includes not just Afro-Americans but many different cultural groups which have occupied and helped build the eastern side of the city of Austin. Native American, Mexican American, Anglo-American. So we're trying to keep as broad a perspective on the museum's programs and on the constituents that we serve as we can. One of our practices, which is not unusual in museums, but which we've exploited a great deal, is that we tend to try to salvage a lot of our exhibits, what we can of the exhibits, and exhibits that we borrow, put them together and keep them as exhibits that can be loaned out to other community organizations. So a lot of our past exhibitions are kept together and can be loaned out to public schools, elementary and secondary and high schools, and we do a great deal of that with a lot of our past exhibits. The museum has always had a well-trained, highly qualified staff, and so it's with a cadre of perhaps 30 or 40 similar museums around the country, has always maintained a good reputation as, for the quality of its exhibits and its programs. There are a very interesting group of museums now in the United States that are primarily a phenomenon of the 1960s and 70s and 80s. I think that must number perhaps better than 40. Museums focusing on Afro-American culture, history, and art. There is an organization, Afro-American Museum Association, which serves as a center of gravity for this group of museums. The George Washington Carver Museum in Austin is known as one of that group, and one with a very good quality of programming, and for that reason it does draw a certain amount of attention outside the community and outside the state. So it does draw a significant traffic of tourists who visit Austin.
We're proud of the Carver in our neighborhood, especially because it provides so much warmth and a sense of belonging to the Afro-American. It's very important for our children to be exposed to the museum and have the opportunity to come from their neighborhood and walk to the museum and see some of the exhibits and be exposed and learn about things that they have no knowledge of. We hope that you will take time and come by and visit us at the Carver and enjoy some of the exhibits and support us financially and in any other way you may like to. We look forward to seeing you.